Welcome to Maison Otaku. Come in, have a seat.
I'm Justin.
And I'm Mike.
And we're here to talk to you about anime. We've got a great episode lined up for you today.
Yep, but first I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you who watched and subscribed our previous video. It does mean a lot to us.
And we can't thank you as a group, but we're going to thank you all a little bit less directly by giving you another great episode.
Yep, as we will hopefully continue to do for some time. But for today's episode, I've got a few segments for you where I will be discussing some practical information for when you get out there and start collecting, as well as talk about some hidden gems you might not recognize at first.
And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about unusual things. There's some first pieces, some last pieces, and some really just gorgeously weird pieces out there on the market that you might overlook because you don't know their history.
Yep. But first, Justin and I have a segment where we are going to pick up a little bit where we left off last time, and as you might remember, we discussed formats, so we're going to go into a little more specifics.
So stick around, because things are about to get square and plastic. So a little bit about my week. I had a great one. I went out to Half Price Books and found actually a wonderful reference book. I called Mike about this, and he was pretty excited for me because I only paid $9 for it. And
yeah.
It's great.
No, it's a really cool history book almost called Watching Anime, Reading Manga, 25 Years of Essays and Reviews. Actually, it's funny, when I was discussing it with him, I remember having used this as a resource for something I couldn't think of what. It was for a school essay I was doing, oddly enough.
Yeah. And it really is reference material. It's totally an academic piece covering many years of reviews, many years of essays, many years of articles on the subject of anime and manga. And it's all collected by, of all people, Fred Patton, who is a wonderful figure in the hobby. Actually the first man to import manga into the States in 1972, which I didn't even know prior to reading through this. And he's very factual, backs everything up. If you can find a copy, I tremendously recommend it because it's so much good information that you probably don't have on the Proterozoic era of the hobby.
Yep.
And that really, because of that archaeological artifact right there, that brings us to where we're going now, which is some of the other interesting tangents of anime there are out there that you can take in your collecting. And Mike, I think you're going to start off with one of the more screwball ones.
Yeah. So we're going to go talk about different formats now. Now, I have this one here. Just a disclaimer, I have no idea if anime was ever released on this format, but it's so wonky I think it's worth discussing. This is a CED. It stands for Capacitance Electronic Disc. Long story short, the whole disc is one big capacitor, and a needle actually runs along it reading the stored energy.
It's a phenomenally weird format. The only film I've ever seen on this format, other than his copy of Time Bandits, was actually Muzzy, which I watched in 5th grade French class. So, between Time Bandits, which of course is Terry Gilliam, and Muzzy, near as we can tell, it's a format that was only ever used for obscure children's programming.
More or less, which is actually funny because I have like a couple different Muppets things I've only ever seen released on this.
Yeah.
Now, I really should point out, these do not work. They're cool, but useless.
They're the Atari Jaguar cartridge of video formats.
No, I think more to the point, they're the 8-track of video formats if 8-track was worse. And yes, I just said that.
Yeah.
Essentially, these actually degrade like a lot of idiots think VHS degrades.
Yes, and the players are ridiculously expensive.
Yep.
Hence the reason why we haven't watched this.
Yeah, I did manage to track down one, but even when you can find them, they're often not working. But it suckers you in because the discs are stupid cheap. I paid $2 for this one. I don't think I ever paid more than $3 for a disc, but then I had to fork over $100 and some odd on a player,
which didn't work.
No, it worked. It's just they're fiddly.
Yeah. About as fussy as a lot of the early Pong consoles
Yeah.
if you're into vintage video game collecting.
But anyway, so...
Oddity, unusual, no collectability, but great to have as a conversation piece.
Yeah. The cool factor is definitely through the roof, despite the crappiness of the format.
And if you happen to know that anime was released on this format, by all means share it with us. We'd love to find out. We expect something goofball by Streamline or US Rendition,
Probably.
maybe even FHE, which brings us to our next piece.
Yep. Now, speaking of FHE, this here, this is a whole bunch of oddball stuff. First of all, this is an official U.S. release, I believe this was done by Carl Masick, no less, of Space Pirate Captain Harlock. Oversized case. With
Beautiful artwork.
Yes.
2 episodes.
With an internal hard case.
Yeah, so
But this is Captain Harlock on beta.
Yes. Captain Harlock on beta.
Yeah, this is just Win.
Yes. Those of you who are actually fairly knowledgeable on anime in the past 20 years probably remember beta most from that really great episode of Cowboy Bebop where Spike has to find a beta player so that Faye recaptures a part of her childhood. No spoilers, but it's a fun episode.
Yep.
But beta was really a great format. It was the combatant to VHS in the early era.
And us true believers understand that beta actually has vastly superior picture and sound quality to VHS. Disclaimer, the tracking is fiddly, but once you get the tracking dialed in right, picture and sound are great.
Yes. It's scarce. We know there's more out there. We don't know how much more is out there. But if you find it, it's fantastic. They're usually boxed like this. They're usually out there like this. The players actually hold up pretty well. And again, collectability, not yet there. Although this particular Harlock beta tape is fairly sought after, particularly by Japanese fans.
Yep.
Because the quality holds up so well, so it's actually very close to original broadcast quality rather than the recent remastering.
Yeah, in fact, up until even recently, a lot of broadcast stations were using beta before they switched to digital.
Yes. Which, speaking digital,
Yep.
brings us into the next
Yep.
piece.
Now, I discussed Laserdisc a bit at length in our last episode, but we're going to talk about it some more because it's just that awesome.
It is.
Now, as he says digital, I should point out something interesting. Laserdisc is a digital-analog hybrid.
Stick with us on that. That is a little wonky. Mike might even have to talk numbers on this.
Yeah, I'll discuss that a bit more in my later segment, but... So basically, this is about the size of these as compared to us. Come in, like I talked about the inserts. Here's an interesting thing. Oversized poster with character descriptions, the original Japanese version, and a translated English version.
Now, the vast majority of these were done by Pioneer, because Pioneer was really the one trying to push the technology.
Yep.
And that's what's really cool. Pioneer had so many great releases in the mid-90s. You had Tenchi, you had Moldiver, which wasn't a great release, but we'll get into how you end up with Moldiver.
Yeah.
You had the Oh My Goddess movie, which is near and dear to my heart. You have just a tremendous catalog. And it was available in this high-quality format for a tremendous price tag that you really only could watch on a Pioneer Laserdisc Player.
Yep.
So they got you coming and going.
Yeah, which is the way to go anyway. Quick note, if you want a really good one, the Pioneer CLDV 2800, very easy to find, very cheap, industrial quality Laserdisc player, which I own. I recommend you go out and find one if you want to enjoy this format.
Or if you don't feel like investing in a player to enjoy the format, probably because you'll have a lot of this on DVD. A lot of it did survive the market crash of about 2009. So, if you don't want to go that route, you just want to own these because they're fun to have.
Yeah, you can frame these things.
Then, by all means, frame them, collect them. You still, for total value, and they are climbing in value, you want inserts. You want good, unfaded, and unmarked box covers. The sleeves are really the collectability there. The discs themselves, playable is great. Not scratched, not chipped, not cracked. Other than that, not really the meat of the sandwich. That's the sleeve.
Yep. Now, we're going to use this to talk about something else that's important to talking about, as we alluded to, when you're collecting, and that is Moldiver.
You'll own Moldiver.
Yeah, see, no one actually collects Moldiver. I have never met a Moldiver fan. I've never come across anyone who can tell me what the story or characters are. But it just finds its way into your collection.
We know about a dozen personal friends of ours who are collectors in the hobby, who have Moldiver on DVD, VHS, or Laserdisc, who own it.
Yeah.
They own Moldiver, either episodes or complete. I have the complete Moldiver. I don't know where I got the complete Moldiver. I didn't set out to get the complete Moldiver. I just have it.
Yeah.
I don't watch it.
Yeah, I think I got this in like an eBay lot of a bunch of other Laserdiscs that I actually wanted to get. I'm just like, I get Moldiver, I guess.
Yeah. And here's the really other weird part about it. Moldiver isn't bad.
Well, yeah.
It's not great. It's not fantastic, but it's not Mad Bull 34.
No.
It's not Tank Cop
it's
bad.
painfully mediocre.
I mean, you'll hear people talk about MD Geist as being bad, and these are things that you can objectively say, wow, there is something so terribly bad about that. I mean, Candidate for Goddess was terribly bad.
Yeah, I'd rather watch this than that.
Moldiver, it's so bland and inoffensive and unmemorable that you're just sitting there like, why did they bother to do this? They could have made it terrible, or they could have made it good. They could have gone a direction with it. Instead, they stayed so safe and bland.
Yeah, like I said, I think painfully mediocre about sums it up.
This is the bad company of anime. This is the Jim Belushi and Talking Dog of anime.
Yep.
As a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Jim Belushi did one of the voices.
Yeah, hold on, I'm checking. English voice talent. Nope.
No Jim Belushi.
Oh, another, oh, never mind. Wow.
Did you think you found something interesting about Moldiver?
No, I was going to say I thought it was another Wendy Lee role, but no.
No,
so
not
notable,
even that interesting.
Yeah, notable for not even having Wendy Lee.
Yes. So, yeah, Moldiver, not interesting.
Nope.
Most important thing we can tell you about it.
Yep. Now, you're going to notice we didn't really talk about VHS too much, or DVD. Well, DVD, it's simple. You know what DVD is, and to be honest, there's not too much to discuss beyond what we already talked about. VHS, much the same, but I'm going to be going into much more detail with those in my segment.
And you'll also notice we haven't mentioned the Blu-ray introduction right now, which is bringing up some good things. Higher video quality is great for things like Akira, Summer Wars, and so forth. The larger storage capacity is great for bringing down the price of some complete series, although they're not really doing that.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's... remember in our first episode when I talked about DVD not always living up to its potential? Blu-ray is having a similar issue where you can fit tons of information on this disc, but for marketing reasons, a lot of companies won't.
Yes. And it's a shame. I think it's really holding the format back as far as a vehicle for anime. And the lack of really substantially good players. I'm sure a lot of you disagree with me, but I have yet to find a Blu-ray player that so thoroughly justifies the investment of a Blu-ray player, a high-definition TV, and all new media to play on it for any particular film. And those of you who are suggesting, well, why don't I just get a PS3? Because I'm already looking at getting a PS4, so do I want to jump back a generation and jump ahead a generation for games I don't yet want? Which I think is a fair assessment of the current landscape. So
I, of course, have an answer to that, but that's another episode.
Yeah, and at the moment, I'm just not watching Blu-ray. I probably will at some point. I'm sure there will be something I can't live without released on Blu-ray. Right now, thank you, Funimation. You've got War on Geminar on Blu-ray. You're holding it hostage. but I'm streaming it. You put it on Netflix, so it's your own fault.
Also, we mentioned Akira on Blu-ray. Go out and get that if you're a fan of that movie, because so far as I'm aware, aside from the original streamlined VHS release, that's the only way to get the streamlined dub.
Yes. So,
which I actually put very briefly. The was it Pioneer did the second dub?
Yes, Pioneer did the second dub.
The Pioneer dub is arguably a superior translation, but invariably the streamlined dub is a superior script.
Yes, it's a lot more true to the spirit, because Masick was very good about staying true to the spirit, staying true to the message, whereas Pioneer was very good about staying true to the translation.
Yeah. Also, that original dub was actually produced in Japan.
Yes. And that'll be a really interesting thing for my segment, is when I get to it, because there's some really cool dubs that were done like that.
Oh, yeah.
But I think what that can really summarize on is, even with all the interesting things on the unusual formats, you'll still have a lot of fun with the traditional formats of VHS and DVD.
Yeah, about 80% of my collection is VHS, so I am not knocking the norm in the least. So now I'm going to go over with you some things you should look for while you're out there collecting, and I'm going to start with talking about the last bits of format-specific things you need to know. Now, as you may recall, I discussed or mentioned that Laserdisc is a digital-analog hybrid. Not going to go into too much detail, but essentially, Laserdisc is analog video with digital audio, and, well, actually, yeah, that's really the simplest way to put it. Now, there are two main formats of Laserdisc out there. You have CLV and CAV. Now, the most common one is CLV. That stands for Constant Linear Velocity. Now, that's your basic format. You have about 60 minutes aside on that, and pretty much all Laserdiscs are double-sided. Now, you might be asking, why is a Laserdisc so huge if it only holds 60 minutes aside? Well, there's a very good reason for that, and it's one of the things that makes Laserdisc awesome. The video is completely uncompressed. So you have, instead of sort of reading files off of a disc, or at least compressed information off of a disc, it's reading it along like a VCR reads a VHS tape. Now, the other format is CAV. That stands for Constant Angular Velocity. I'm not going to really go into what these mean, but all you need to know is that just refers to the orientation of the data on the disc, physical disc itself. CAV is awesome. It does sacrifice time. You can only put about 30 minutes aside for each disc. So it was really reserved for a lot of special edition releases. The reason that you get such fewer space on the disc is because instead of just reading like a regular time code, you know, runs along, you actually see each individual frame, at least as it was encoded on the disc. So instead of a time code, you're seeing a frame counter come up. And I should point out that both of these formats are universal across all players. Any Laserdisc player will play both, so you don't have to worry about getting multiple decks. So you had some stuff like this right here. This is A.D.V Police Files. This is actually a Laserdisc, or a hybrid Laserdisc. So this is episode 3 and some music videos. Now, one side of the disc has a version that's CLV, and the other side has CAV. So you actually get to see both, which is kind of cool. Not too much else to say. A notable thing to look for that's in CAV is this. It's not anime, well, it's not Japanese anyway, but this, of course, is Who Framed Roger Rabbit. This Laserdisc is kind of infamous. I could talk for about an hour on all this stuff with this movie, but you have different versions having different edits of the video. This is the one that famously, because you can go frame by frame, you can see the scene where you see Jessica Rabbit's dress and she's not wearing panties. So, but won't talk about that anymore this episode. Beta formats, only real thing to note, there's Beta 1, Beta 2, and Beta 3. I'm going to be honest with you, I have no idea what the difference is in between formats aside from one's a later version of the other. Just keep an eye out if you're going out to buy a beta player, make sure it can play all three, or at least Beta 2 and 3. Because those aren't universal among all players. Like, you can probably get them to play, but they're going to have some issues. So, that's the last bit I have to say on format. Now I'm going to go into some things you should look for. Now, like, stuff like this right here. I talked about, crazy tapes with all kinds of stuff. So this is, hard cased. This is, of course, Anime Ego Bubblegum Crisis tape. Released one episode of tape for, I think it was like $35 or something brand new. Subtitled. But you have this insert where it's like song lyrics and production notes. You have these awesome thin slit blue tapes with the silver printed information. You see these, you buy them. Like, seriously. This is what you want. Some other interesting things, variants of that. You have this Battle Angel. Again, hardcover, subtitled. A lot of the special subtitled tapes were released this way back in the day. And this is one of A.D.V's earlier releases. But, as you may or may not know, A.D.V tapes are all white, but they have that same type of tape white with a printed label on it, which is usually printed labels are what you see on these types of tapes. You're not going to see a sticker too often. But this is my copy of Black Magic M66 that I talked about earlier on. Now this, like I said, these the border and the label glows in the dark, as I said. But you have a black, thin slit tape with a big full color label. You do not see this. This is, once again, you see it, you buy it. So, like, those are some cool VHS variants. If you see anything even remote, and those tapes do come in, like, a whole rainbow of colors. I've seen red ones, I've seen yellow ones. Actually, a note on tape colors. As I said, A.D.V released pretty much all their tapes in white. Now, the collectability of this is questionable, but if you see a black A.D.V tape, like, where you can tell it's actually the original tape, pick it up. I've only ever seen one of these. It was a single volume of A.D.V, I think like volume 7 or something. So, another thing you're going to need to look at is occasionally you are going to have to see the serial number on a tape because, well, you got this here. Now this is nothing new or special. This is a Ranma VHS tape. I'm sure you've all seen some of these. The only way to know which order these go in is by looking at the catalog number on the side, and even then, well, let's put it this way. They released them, by season, but they didn't number the seasons. They gave them arbitrary names, like this is Anything Goes Martial Arts. That's the name of the season. I believe that's season 1 or 2. Feel free to correct me on that, but I'm pretty sure that's right. But then you look on the side here, the only way to tell what this is, so you have VVRA, RA of course, Ranma, 009. So that tells you that this is volume 9. That is the only way to tell you which volume of whatever season it is you have of Ranma on VHS. It's usually not too necessary, but to point out another company that actually did that pretty good, you have... this is really nothing special. This is a Legend of Crystania VHS. They're a dime a dozen. Only notable thing about this one is it's still factory sealed, but... So, I really like the way A.D.V did this. So, you have it going VHS LC, so VHS format, LC, Legend of Crystania, / 003, so that's telling you this is Volume 3, D for dubbed. For subtitle, you have it in an S, and hybrid DVDs actually ended in an H. So A.D.V is pretty consistent about this, but I wouldn't rely on that too much with a lot of other companies, especially if you're looking at Manga Video, whose catalog numbers are only comprehensible by the cyborg monkeys who programmed them. But I mean, really, those are the main things you gotta know when you're going out there, looking at stuff, digging through stuff, in terms of, physical shapes, orders, whatnot. Quick note on storage, just because this is important. When you store your VHS tapes, you always want them upright. You can have them like this, like this, like this, like this, it doesn't matter, but you do not want to store them long-term like this. I'm sure you've all seen tapes where the top or the bottom has a fuzzy line going along. Now, that can be due to tracking, of course, but a lot of times when you can't fix it through tracking, that's because the tape has sort of wilted and you have it deformed along one edge because it's sitting like that. Storing them like this or like this, however you want, will prevent that to a significant extent. One last note on that also. If you have a ton of DVDs and VHS tapes, comic book boxes are your savior. Now, I prefer Comic Defense brand because I know these fit. You can, because you know how it is, there's slight variances in between anything, but Comic Defense brand or something with similar dimensions, a VHS tape will fit like this perfectly going along, and you can get 2 levels of them. So you can get 50 VHS tapes per box, 100 DVDs, or 200 thin-pack DVDs per box. So if you have a large collection and a shelf is just not practical for you, that's a good way to go. So now I'll hand it off to Justin, who's going to talk to you about some interesting releases.
Anime is weird. So let's enjoy some of the weirdness. I'd like to start by talking about the companies. There's been a lot of them. There's probably been about 30 or so different companies to release anime in the States. And some of them are really great, like Streamline. Some of them are really bad, like Streamline. But all of them had somewhere where they started. For instance, A.D.V, better known in the early days as A.D. Vision, we don't know why, was started by Matt Greenfield because he loved Devil Hunter Yohko. This is a recurring theme where creators find something through fan subs or through unmarked comics or untranslated comics that just grabs their attention, and they run with it. In A.D.V's case, Matt Greenfield loved Devil Hunter Yohko, which is a very surprisingly dull take on just what the title says. A girl hunting devils who's named Yohko. She wears your typical way too high slit Chinese dress with these big poof balls and little dangly bits. Character design's a little bland. Art is a little bland. Action is a little predictable. But it was where they got their start. When you have a VHS copy of Devil Hunter Yohko, you are literally holding Matt Greenfield's love letter to this obscure cartoon and his hopes that enough other people like what he likes that he can show more people what he likes. It's kind of a nascent naivete, a really innocent release, the first release. Equally so, Central Park Media, which was based out of New York, which was really unusual at the time, started with, oddly enough, the same place I started in fandom, Project A.K.O., which is the very original piece of superpowered schoolgirls. The first superpowered girl wearing the sailor uniform in anime history. And the whole thing was really just this sort of bizarre mashup of Tatsunoko superhero and space opera invasion played out against a schoolgirl rivalry, which was totally irrational, totally unusual, 100% parody, and it captured my attention like nothing else. and is the reason why I'm sitting here in front of this camera talking to you today. Also, another parody that launched another massive name in the hobby, Maddox01. A parody of the real robot genre. A man who's late to a date, so he swipes a mecha. No less irrational than, say, Amuro Ray's behavior, or shoot, anyone else, really. Just a little bit less stressful. But it's a fantastic piece, and it launched Anime-Eigo, who was one of the true fantastic companies, really devoted to releasing a quality product time and time again, who wound down with their final release, which was Yawara, a fashionable judo girl. The only real reason they licensed Yawara was this weird dedication to the synergy surrounding Urusei Yatsura. It was the show following Urusei Yatsura on television in Japan, and was a minor hit, mostly because of the carryover viewers. And they decided, you know what? Let's try and celebrate that here. They only got the first 40 episodes of Yawara, though, before they decided to pull entirely out of the anime market, mostly due to the problems with piracy. And that was a really significant problem at that point in time, and so many companies were dependent entirely on either DVD releases or television broadcast. And Anime-Eigo, being so devoted to more unique, classic titles, didn't have broadcast opportunity. So with illegal downloads, they were really strapped for cash. So they decided to chase after a market that was a little bit more dedicated and a little bit more adult, which was classic Japanese cinema. Interesting side note, if you like classic Japanese cinema, give a try to Tokyopop's Spring in Chaos, which is actually a told entirely with cat people story, a biopic of one of Japan's great poets from the classical era. You'll never see anything else like it, and licensing things like that was one of the reasons why Tokyopop's DVD division died so quickly. On the other hand, a company that didn't die at all was Manga Entertainment, and they licensed things like the steaming crap pile Shadow Skill. Granted, there are going to be about 3 of you out there who saw Shadow Skill on TV late at night in the early 2000s and are thinking, no way, that was great, that was awesome, the fight scenes were short, were stilted. And Mike is going to come on and tell you, you ran down Shadow Skill? Don't believe him. Don't waste your time. But do waste about 50 cents if you find it in a DVD bargain bin, because it's worth a laugh. And the character designs are actually pretty cool. L and Gao are fantastically designed characters, and some of the most muscular but lean characters you'll see outside of Baki the Grappler. And while we're discussing musculature on slender characters, usually brings us to Masamune Shirow. Well, how would you like to see one of the times when a Masamune Shirow piece went wrong? I kid you not, it's almost never happened. Ghost in the Shell is a monument to everything anime can do. Appleseed is tremendous fun. Dominion Tank Police is probably the best thing I've ever watched because it has everything I could ever want. Stripper cat girls, tanks, How to Kill magazine, everything you could possibly want. And then he did Gundress. Full disclosure, he only did the character designs for Gundress and allowed the licensure of his pre-created worlds from his Intron Depot stuff for the creators of Gundress to work on. It was kind of a fan film, if you could really call it that, with the creator's permission. Masamune Shirow will give his permission to do just about anything. After all, the man really doesn't care much anymore. He's not a mangaka, he's a calendar artist these days. And he likes that. He has a lot of fun with that. And his calendars are fantastic, by the way. But it meant that he really had no interest in what was going on. So what was created was this bland, dull, boring, purely referential, but not really all that involved piece that supposedly tied in with everything else the man had done, but didn't say anything, didn't do anything, and certainly didn't have the amount of detail and nut and bolt intrigue that anything Masami Yoshiro himself would have created. The only reason we remember it, though, was because of the marketing push. This was the very dawn of the DVD era, and nobody was sure what was going to be a hit, but the next hit was definitely going to sell a whole lot of DVDs. So Media Blasters, in their infinite wisdom, thought, you know, Ghost in the Shell has been selling like gangbusters for manga entertainment. And we can make some money off of this. We can make a lot of money because we've got something by the same creator. Let's go for it. You saw posters for this on the wall of every Suncoast, every mom and pop video store. Everybody was so sure Gundress was the next big thing, and it wasn't. It was terrible. It was so terrible that you're going to not spend more than $5 to find out how terrible it is, but you're going to get a laugh out of it. And if you're a Masami Yoshiro fan, it's necessary if you're a completionist. So, by all means, try it out. And try out anything that looks a little screwball. The screwball stuff in your collection will be the stuff you'll pull off the shelf when your friends are over and you're all not sure what to watch. Because you'll have a laugh, you might have something more interesting to say, and undoubtedly, they're not going to say, oh man, I've seen this before.
Alright, so, as Justin probably gave you a pretty good idea, there's a million and one things we can talk about like this. We're going a bit over time already as it is, so I'm just going to shotgun a few things at you that you should make sure to keep an eye out for. So, starting off, we have this. This is Robotech Perfect Collection. This is great. It's available from Streamline Video. Basically, each tape is 2 episodes of whatever original series. In this case, it's Super Dimension Cavalry Southern Cross, followed by the 2 episodes of Robotech it was used to make. They're not stupid rare, but you're not going to come across them in most used bookstores, but keep an eye out for them. They're worth picking up. Now, this next one, this is part of the Rumik World OVA series. It's called Super Gal. Now, most of you may know this as Maris the Chojo. There's a reason for the name change. This specific release of this is pretty rare because DC Comics actually threatened to sue US Manga Corps over the title, you know, Supergirl, Supergal. So, essentially they put a very limited run of these out, and then the rest of it was retitled Maris the Chojo. The video itself is technically exactly the same, but the title's been changed. In our first video, we mentioned, you know, these things don't have much monetary value. They're worth whatever a collector is willing to pay. This is a good case in point. Open market value, not much more than $5, but I bought one of these off of my friend who is a fellow collector. Talked him down to about $20, and still felt like I was getting a deal. So, this is one of those things right here. Next up, this one's really interesting. As you see, it's just called Macross. Now, this is actually a superior version of a title released by celebrities just for kids called Macross in Clash of the Bionoids, which is an obscure official US release of Super Dimension Fortress Macross Do You Remember Love? This is the Celebrities Just for Kids version was kind of hacked up. You got a few, about maybe 10, 15, possibly, yeah, I wouldn't say any more than 15 or so minutes of missing footage. This, everything's in here. There's every explosion, every guy that gets killed is in there. You even have the full Zero-G Minmay shower scene. The only thing that's even remotely changed, aside from the fact that it's been dubbed, of course, is the ending Minmay concert. It's technically not even taken out because you still hear the instrumental audio of the music, but they took the visuals out, and honestly, I think that was mainly just due to the fact that this was released by a company called Best Film and Video Corp, which has some great releases, but they do a lot of their stuff on the cheap, so I think they just didn't feel like going through the trouble of editing in English end credits, but very cool release. If you can find it, pick it up. Now, much like when Justin and I discussed the second Urusei Yatsura movie, this is another case where DVD is actually more sought after than VHS. This is, of course, Super Dimension Fortress Macross 2, movie version specifically. Macross 2 is probably my favorite Macross series, and I'm sure I've made myself a lot of friends by saying that. But basically, condensation of the series, you're not really missing much. I think pretty much everything's there, but the DVD release is cool because this is the only version you can get that actually has extra footage that was included just in the DVD release of the movie, and this was pretty low production. You can see them on eBay from time to time, but you're not going to really see them out there in the open market too often. So, again, tagline, you see this, you buy it. Aside from that, as I mentioned, there's just a few things, if you don't really have a trained eye, you might pass up because you're like, oh, that's not anime. There are actually two pretty good anime incarnations of The Little Mermaid. One was a movie from the 70s. The other was, well, they both got proper U.S. releases, but the other, which I think is just called Saban's The Little Mermaid over here, was released on US TV. It is a full TV series. There's a really good anime TV series of The Jungle Book. There's, in terms of original works, you actually have, there's this really quirky, actually Christian anime called Superbook, where these kids travel into, like, Bible stories with their magical robot or something like that. It's, in addition to just being some fun stuff, it's good for a laugh, if nothing else. And you have, of course, World Masterpiece Theater. You had great stuff like, Little Women was one of the great ones. You had, Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn. Basically, this is a, excuse me, a long-running franchise. Still going today, I think, because I believe Emily of New Moon was technically part of this. But takes, as the name suggests, different literary pieces from all around the world and gives you a full anime series of it. So, the main point is, anytime you see something kind of like that, or that you look at the artwork and think, well, this kind of might possibly be old anime, you look at the box, you look at the back of it, even if they don't include any of the Japanese credits, in the copyright information, if you see, Toei, Toho, Sanrio, any of those great companies, pick it up. It's anime. So, I think that basically covers most of that, at least anything I can cover in this short segment.
Alright, well, we're here to the final segment of the show, and of course that is this week's recommendation, and this week it's Mike's turn, and Mike, you've picked one depressing fucker of a movie for us to talk about.
Yeah, this is a nice one for all you people who looked at Record of Lodoss War and thought, it'd be sweet if Yoshiyuki Tomino or Mamoru Oshii directed this.
It is all kinds of up in that Oshii, Anno, Tomino thread of soul-crushing despair, with a bit of a message, definitely with a message.
Well, yeah, it is that odd, actually rare kind of depressing that I think you can only really get from anime, where it makes you want to cry, but also kind of makes you feel alive at the same time.
That's a good way of describing it. And of course, we actually have to give you a title as to what we're discussing, and that's Windaria.
Yep.
Or Once Upon a Time, if you find one of the other two releases stateside.
Yes.
This is a fun one, because this is one of those historical nightmares that we like talking about in terms of collecting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, now, that's significant to say, because I am specifically recommending you the Carl Masick version. It should be no secret by now that we are big fans of his. And this is one of the instances where I think he actually took an already great work, don't get me wrong, I love the original version, but he actually improved upon it in several ways.
Yeah, he took out roughly 11 minutes or so of footage.
If even that.
From the original work, did a little bit of rearranging, added narration by the professor from Gilligan's Island,
Yeah.
which is a screwball thing, but we were able to confirm that.
Mm-hmm.
And gave the film a little bit more of an uplifting bend, despite its really sort of dreariness. It's sort of moving through this really hopeless atmosphere.
Oh yeah, and I mean, and don't get me wrong, that's all still very much part of the movie. But basically what you have here, in terms of setting, is you start with a fantasy anime medieval setting, and then you sort of move through time where you kind of skip most of the Renaissance and go straight into the Industrial Revolution, which somehow also gives you hovercraft and tanks, and that's sort of the socioeconomic surrounding you have in this movie.
It's definitely its own aesthetic. I think the only thing you could really compare it to is it's very Nausicaa. It's very...
Yeah, it's Nausicaa meets Final Fantasy VI. Is about the best way I can describe that.
And the setup is a very straightforward setup. You've got two warring nations in one region with little peaceful valley caught in between. And you've got a bold hero who decides he's going to set out for adventure and excitement and do what's right. Except the real big thing here is that whole thing falls apart.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, and it's great because the beginning of this, well actually not even the beginning, the first half of this movie just sets it up where you just fall in love with these characters, and in a very Tomino way kind of just makes it so, oh, see these characters you love? Bad things are going to happen to them.
And it's not Tomino.
Yeah,
It's not Tomino, it's not
Oshi, not
it's
Anno.
not Anno. The director, actually, of all things, is one of the guys behind Minky Momo.
And Pokemon.
Yes.
Yeah, this dude directed Pokemon.
Which shocked us,
Yeah.
but fantastic for him, good range. I mean, if you can go from children's programming to truly adult fare.
Actually, upon thinking about it, this really explains the episode where Butterfree dies.
I'll have to take your word for it on that. I was kind of playing with boobs when Pokemon came out.
Fair enough, fair enough. But, it's another great thing about this film, too, is it's sort of, I will often say, and you'll hear me say this a million times, just because something's original doesn't make it good, and just because something's recycling old stories doesn't make it bad, and this definitely takes... It is a better version of Romeo and Juliet, combined with a better version of the Odyssey, made into an 80s fantasy anime.
Which really pretty much explains it as one of Mike's picks.
Yeah.
And really it's one of my picks too, in terms of great art pieces.
Oh,
it's definitely an art piece. The character designs are very well done. The same fellow who did Weathering Continent.
Another great obscure fantasy anime we recommend.
This will be a recurring theme. Fantasy and obscure are always going to be in the same sentence.
Mm-hmm.
When the most popular fantasy anime out there are Berserk and Record of Lodoss War and apparently Gwyn Saga, but that's a little new for us to be discussing with any sort of authority, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I don't dislike Gwyn Saga, it's just I don't really have much to say about it.
Right, we don't have much to say about it. You couldn't get it on a tape.
Yeah. Pretty much.
But, no, fantastic film. Depressing film.
Yep. But like he noted on the beauty of it, that it definitely, it screws with your head actually, because there's there's a scene where I'm not going to spoil anything, but some very bad stuff happens to two of the main characters, and it's just, not only is there, do you want to cry because there's some messed up stuff going on, but it's just so gorgeously animated.
It's beautifully animated. It's oddly enough very well acted.
Oh, yeah.
And a little stilted for the English dub.
Mm-hmm.
but that was pretty typical for the time. But still conveys the emotion, still captures the moment very well. The snippets I've found online of the original is very classically Japanese, grandiose, kind of kabuki.
Yeah.
If
But, also, this is long before the era that we live in now, where every Japanese voice actor sounds the same. Well, either that or they have the same 5 they keep using.
Yeah, I mean, but we gotta hand it to them. They keep using Takehiro Koyasu, and that's always a good choice. He could read the phone book in Japanese, so you wouldn't understand it, but he would read to you the phone book, which you would then read at the bottom of the screen.
But back on track. I mean, well, also I should point out this is like we watched this before we pointed it out, or before we did this video, and this was Justin's first time actually seeing it front to back.
Yeah, I've always kind of danced around it. Definitely on the list, just not quite so high up the list because I'm a little bit more comic. I'm a little bit more modern setting. When you hear more of my recommendations, you're going to hear a lot of late 80s, early 90s, Masamune Shiro. You're going to hear a lot of really exciting stuff with a lot of gratuitous sex and violence. And you don't get that in Windaria. In fact, you really
you get the violence.
You get violence, but you get violence of a really clipped nature, of a very direct and final nature.
Well, yeah, it's like watching World War II drama in terms of the way the combat's portrayed, which honestly I like that about it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's art. It's definitely an art film. It's definitely another example of the sort of films we only really got during that bubble economy that we're not going to see again.
Yeah, they not only will they never make movies like this, I really don't think they can make them again.
No, it's a very small period. There were a lot of great films on it. We'll probably do an entire segment point of bubble economy period art films.
Which, honestly, would double as our here's the anime you need to see.
Mm-hmm. But I think we can pretty much sum up Windaria in beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think I should really talk about the ending, too, here, because I'm not a guy who's big on avoiding spoilers, but this is really a movie you need to experience. But I'll just say,
on top of that, it's about a 30-year-old film, so...
Yeah. I have never once sat through this where I didn't get teared up at least one time, and tonight, after seeing this thing over a dozen times, was no exception. The ending where... Excuse me. Sorry.
Alan is just...
Yeah, I'm...
admitting he has to improve himself, that he is going to earn enlightenment. Mm-hmm. You'll gather that with the film.
I will simply say this, you know it is a good movie when one of the last things you see is the main character on his hands and knees sobbing uncontrollably.
Yes. And you definitely want to cry some man tears with him. That's some shit, brother.
Yeah, you are not a man if you don't cry at this movie.
Yeah. This is a man tear moment, much like that can only be matched by Arcadia of My Youth, the opening sequence through the Stanley Wish. Mm. Which, that is once again recommending Leiji Matsumoto.
Is superior to something else.
Yes. So, at which point, I suppose...
It's time to end.
It's time to end. So, from us here at Maison Otaku...
Thanks for visiting. This is Mike.
And Justin, saying enjoy what you watch.
And share what you enjoy.
した